Let me ask you something you've probably never said out loud. When the lights go out and no one's watching, who are you, really? Not the version of yourself you've learned to present at work. Not the carefully managed identity you display to friends. Not the obedient mask you wear in public. I mean the you who lurks in the silence. The one who fantasizes about things you would never dare admit. The you who hungers, who envies, who lusts, who aches for power, for beauty, for danger, for release. You know exactly what I mean. There's a part of you, call it dark, call it shameful, call it animal, that slips through the cracks of your perfectly rehearsed life, and you've been told to bury it, to repress it, to pretend it doesn't exist. But here's the terrifying truth. The more you try to kill it, the more it owns you. Carl Jung called this part of us the shadow, and in no realm does it reveal itself more nakedly, more explosively than in our sexuality. Because sexuality isn't just about pleasure, it's about power, it's about shame, it's about the places in your psyche that civilization has tried to erase for thousands of years. And whether you admit it or not, you are at war with this shadow. But here's the forbidden truth Jung whispered to us. The war cannot be won by killing your shadow. The only way forward is to face it, to know it, to integrate it. Because what you refuse to face will control you from the dark. So today, we're not talking about sex in the way society does. We're not going to dress it up in moral language or reduce it to biology. Instead, we're going to enter the underground tunnels of the psyche, where desire becomes obsession, where shame turns to fire, where lust reveals the truth you've been running from your entire life. This is not about becoming good or pure. It's about becoming whole. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Think about that for a second. How many choices in your life, who you're attracted to, what you desire, what you hide, even who you resent, have actually been choices. How much of your so-called free will is really just a hidden program running beneath your awareness, pulling your strings? That's your shadow at work. It is not evil. It is not good. It is simply everything about you that you cannot or will not admit. And here's the dangerous twist. Society conditions us to reject anything that doesn't fit neatly into its rules. So what happens to those rejected parts of you? They don't disappear, they sink, they descend into the basement of your mind, and there they mutate. What starts as a healthy impulse, desire, anger, longing, gets twisted into addiction, obsession, self-destruction. That's why so many people, despite living in an era of supposed sexual freedom, feel enslaved by their desires rather than liberated by them. Porn addictions, secret affairs, compulsions no one can know about, not because these people are weak or dirty, but because they've never learned how to confront the part of themselves that frightens them most, the part of themselves that hungers. And here's where Jung was radical. He believed that what you most repress contains the exact medicine you need, that buried within the sexual shadow is not only your deepest shame, but also your deepest source of vitality, creativity, and even spirituality. But to reach it, you must descend into the underworld of your own psyche, where most people refuse to go. Let me be blunt. Your sexual shadow isn't polite. It doesn't care about your curated Instagram profile, your career goals, your polite dinner conversations. It's raw, it's primal. It It's the part of you that, if projected onto a screen, would make you look away in embarrassment. It's not just about what turns you on in bed, it's about the fantasies you don't tell anyone, the desires that make you question if something is wrong with you, the patterns that repeat in your relationships even when you promise yourself they won't. Ever wonder why certain people trigger you so powerfully? Why someone's confidence, cruelty, or sexuality either captivates you or terrifies you? That's projection. Jung described it as the shadow wearing another person's face. What you see in them, whether it's beauty, dominance, freedom, danger, is often a reflection of something you've exiled in yourself. That woman you label as too much, that man you call arrogant, that person whose sexuality you dismiss as immoral. Be careful, because what you reject out there is usually what you fear in here, and the longer you deny it, the stronger it grows. History shows us this clearly. Societies that repress sexuality most harshly are often the ones where it leaks out in the most disturbing, violent, and destructive ways. What is forbidden becomes alluring. What is punished becomes fetishized. In medieval Europe, the church declared sexuality sinful, and behind the monastery walls, abuse flourished. In Victorian England, public morality was suffocating, and underground brothels thrived. In our own time, we pretend we're liberated, but billions secretly drown in porn, prostitution, and digital fantasy, while being too ashamed to speak about it openly. Why? Because when you deny the shadow, it doesn't disappear, it takes the wheel. So here's the tragic irony. Most people live their entire lives not as themselves, but as masks. We pretend to be good, we pretend to be pure, we try to appear successful, disciplined, spiritual, or enlightened. But beneath that mask, the shadow is boiling. And the more pressure you put on yourself to maintain the mask, the more violently the shadow will erupt. That's why so many powerful men are exposed in scandals. That's why public figures who build brands on morality often fall hardest when their secret life is revealed. It's not hypocrisy, it's the shadow breaking free. You can try to manage it with control, with denial, with repression. But repression is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the stronger it bursts upward. And when it bursts, it doesn't come out politely. It comes out destructively. Addiction, cheating, betrayal, exploitation, violence, all because we were too afraid to admit, I am not just light, I am shadow too. Desire is never neutral. It's a battlefield. On one side there's what you think you want, what you tell yourself, what you post online, what you casually joke about with friends. But beneath that, there's what you really want. And those two things are almost never the same. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't choose your desires, they choose you. Think about it. Did you choose the kind of people who make your pulse quicken? Did you consciously decide which body type, voice, smell, or behavior triggers your fantasies? Of course not. They appeared uninvited, like sparks in the dark. And often they don't align with your values, your religion, your culture, or even your self-image. This is the shadow at work. Carl Jung observed that the shadow doesn't just hold the parts of ourselves we dislike, it also holds our unlived life, the passions, impulses, and potentials we've exiled because they didn't fit the person we thought we should be. Desire, then, is not random. It's the shadow knocking on the door, and this is why sexuality is so explosive. It exposes us. It reveals the gap between who we pretend to be and who we actually are. Nowhere is this clearer than in the paradox of power and submission. On the surface, we all say we want respect, equality, fairness, but in the bedroom, or in the secrecy of our fantasies, something else often emerges. The powerful crave surrender, the submissive crave dominance, the virtuous imagine corruption, the innocent longs to be ruined. Why? Because these dynamics reflect the parts of ourselves we have not integrated. A man who spends his life in rigid control, always responsible, always composed, may fantasize about giving up control completely. A woman who has been told all her life to be good, pure, obedient, may fantasize about breaking every rule. And the reverse is also true. Someone who feels powerless in daily life may secretly fantasize about power, aggression, domination. Desire in this way is not about sex at all. It's about the psyche trying to balance itself. Jung would say, what you repress in one part of life will find its way into another. And sexuality is one of the rawest arenas where this balancing act plays out. So if you've ever been shocked or disturbed by your own fantasies, know this: they don't mean you are broken. They mean your shadow is speaking. The problem is not the fantasy. The problem is when we're too ashamed to confront it. So we live in denial, and it drives us unconsciously instead of consciously. There's a story from the Middle Ages about a monk named Brother Gerard. He lived in a monastery, vowing chastity, devoting his life to prayer. He starved his body, avoided women, refused any pleasure. He was considered holy. But at night, Gerard was tormented by visions. He dreamed of women, of lust, of temptation. He would wake in terror, convinced he was being attacked by demons. The more he prayed against them, the stronger they became. Finally, after years of torment, he confessed to an older monk. The elder laughed softly and said, "Those demons are not from hell, brother. They are from you. And the more you fight them, the more they will grow. Do not pray for them to vanish. Sit with them, learn their names, ask them what they want." This was scandalous advice at the time, but profoundly Jungian. Because here's the truth: your inner demons are rarely foreign invaders. They are the disowned parts of yourself demanding recognition. Brother Gerard's demons were simply his sexuality, twisted by repression into nightmares. And isn't that what so many of us experience today? We exile parts of ourselves in the name of morality, reputation, or image. Then those same parts return, disguised as addictions, obsessions, or destructive choices. You cannot exercise the shadow. You can only integrate it. Let's bring this into the modern age. Pornography is not just an industry. It's a mirror of our collective shadow. Billions of people secretly consume it, yet almost no one talks about it openly. Why? Because porn reveals what people cannot admit about themselves. Notice how porn trends reflect what is forbidden. The most taboo, the most wrong, the most socially condemned categories are often the most popular. That's not an accident. That's the shadow leaking out in plain sight. But here's the paradox. Porn doesn't actually satisfy desire. It inflames it. Because what we're really craving is not the image, not the act. It's the part of ourselves we've been cut off from. The dominance, the surrender, the wildness, the animality, the vulnerability. Porn gives us a simulation of wholeness, but not the reality. And the more we consume the simulation, the further we drift from the real thing. This is why so many people feel empty after the rush, because the shadow doesn't want endless fantasy. It wants recognition. It wants integration. You cannot endlessly distract the shadow with screens. Eventually, it will demand your attention. In reality, Niccolo Machiavelli, the infamous author of The Prince, is rarely associated with sexuality, but his political insights apply eerily well here. Machiavelli argued that rulers who try to appear good at all costs often destroy themselves. Why? because people are not purely good. They are driven by self-interest, passion, and fear. A ruler who ignores this reality will be devoured by it. Now apply that to yourself. You are the ruler of your inner kingdom. Your desires are your subjects. Some are noble, some are wild, some are dangerous. If you try to rule by denying half of them, insisting on appearing pure or perfect, rebellion will erupt. Your shadow will overthrow you. But if you rule as Machiavelli advised, with clear eyes, with an understanding of human nature as it really is, not as it should be, you can govern your inner world more wisely. That means acknowledging the selfishness, the lust, the hunger, the cruelty that lives inside you, not to indulge it blindly, but to understand it, to use it, because the ruler who befriends the dark forces of his kingdom is stronger than the one who pretends those forces don't exist. So here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Your sexual shadow is not something you can escape. It's not something you can cure. It's not even something you should want to get rid of. Because that shadow, those disturbing fantasies, those shameful desires, those dark impulses, are also the roots of your vitality, your creativity, and your capacity for intimacy. The same fire that can burn down your life is the fire that can light your way. If you ignore it, repress it, or try to drown it, it will explode. If you indulge it blindly, it will consume you. But if you confront it, learn from it, and integrate it, it will transform you. And that's the journey Jung hinted at. The war with your shadow cannot be won by victory. It can only be won by union. Carl Jung often compared the work of confronting the shadow to alchemy. The medieval alchemists weren't really turning lead into gold, they were exploring inner transformation through metaphor. The lead was the raw, base, unrefined aspects of the psyche. The gold was the integrated, illuminated whole self. Your sexual shadow is lead. Heavy, ugly, shameful, easily hidden in the dark corners of your life. But if you can endure the heat of self-examination, if you can confront your discomfort without turning away, that lead can be transmuted. It becomes gold. Strength, wisdom, authenticity, and true intimacy. The shadow, in other words, is not an enemy. It is your raw material. Observe your desires without judgment. That means when a fantasy, an impulse, or a shameful memory surfaces, you don't immediately shove it away, nor do you act on it blindly. You pause, you look at it, write it down, sit with it, ask it questions. Where did this come from? What is this part of me trying to express? What need is hidden underneath? You'll often discover that what looks like lust is actually a yearning for closeness, power, or safety. What looks like corruption is often a hunger for freedom. By observing without judgment, you begin to loosen the grip of shame. You stop being controlled by the shadow because you've turned toward it. This is what Jung called active imagination. Entering into dialogue with the figures and images of your unconscious instead of suppressing them. If you've made it this far, it means something within you resonates with these words. Perhaps a part of your own shadow is listening. I invite you, if this message is awakening thoughts in you, subscribe to this channel and share this video. Not for me, but for others who might also be searching for truth in silence. Let's create a space where difficult truths can be spoken and where hidden parts of the soul are no longer banished into darkness. The second step is understanding that your fantasies are not literal instructions. They are symbols. For example, someone who fantasizes about submission may not literally want to be controlled in daily life. The fantasy may symbolize a longing to let go of responsibility, to trust, to release the crushing weight of being in charge all the time. Someone who fantasizes about taboo scenarios may not actually want to enact them. The taboo may symbolize rebellion against societal expectations, a need to break free from imposed purity or obedience. If you take fantasies literally, you either shame yourself or you chase them compulsively. But if you take them symbolically, you can translate them into insight. Every desire is a message. The question is not, how do I get rid of this, but rather, what is this trying to teach me? Integration is not repression, but it's also not reckless indulgence. It's about finding ways to consciously express what the shadow holds. That might mean turning the energy of raw desire into art, writing, or music, bringing honesty into your relationships. Instead of hiding behind masks, exploring power, vulnerability, or intimacy in safe, consensual spaces where they can be honored rather than denied. Think of it like channeling electricity. If you suppress it, you get nothing. If you let it run wild, you get burned. But if you wire it properly, you can light a city. The shadow's energy is the same. Let me give you a real-world example. A corporate executive, outwardly disciplined and respected, came to therapy struggling with compulsive use of extreme online pornography. He was terrified of exposure and disgusted with himself. On the surface, it looked like a simple addiction, but beneath it, there was something deeper. This man lived his entire life in control, leading thousands of employees, making high-stakes decisions, never showing weakness. His fantasies, however, centered on submission, humiliation, and release. He hated this about himself until he began to see the symbolism. His shadow was not trying to destroy him, it was trying to balance him. It was saying, you don't always have to be in control, you can let go, you can be vulnerable. Once he understood this, he stopped fighting his fantasies as enemies. He began to explore vulnerability in healthier ways, through therapy, through honest conversations with his partner, through shifting his lifestyle. The compulsive edge softened, because he was finally listening to what the shadow had been trying to say. Sexual shadow work is not just personal, it's relational. True intimacy means showing up with your whole self, not just the polished, socially acceptable surface, but also the raw, messy undercurrents. That doesn't mean unloading your darkest impulses recklessly on your partner, but it does mean cultivating a space where honesty can breathe. A relationship where one person hides their shadow will always feel incomplete. But a relationship where both people acknowledge their shadows can become a crucible for growth. The very act of speaking shame out loud, of saying, "Here is this part of me I'm afraid you'll reject," is transformative. Because often, the other person responds not with disgust, but with relief. "You too, I thought I was the only one." In that moment, the shadow loses its poison. It's worth remembering, some of the greatest works of art, literature, and philosophy were born not from purity, but from shadow. Dostoevsky wrote about gambling addiction and moral corruption. Nietzsche wrestled openly with forbidden impulses. Even myths reflect this. Dionysus, the god of ecstasy and chaos, was not a demon, but a deity. The Greeks knew that to exclude him was to invite disaster. To honor him was to bring balance. Your shadow, too, contains wild creativity. The energy that frightens you is the same energy that can drive art, passion, and vision. The question is, will you let it destroy you in secret or transform you in the open? Many spiritual traditions warn against lust, against desire, but others saw sexuality as a sacred gateway. In Tantra, for example, Sexual energy is not a sin, but a force of liberation. When approached with awareness, it becomes a fire that burns away illusion and reveals unity. Jung himself studied alchemy, Gnosticism, and Eastern spirituality to understand this paradox. He realized every path to higher consciousness requires descending first into the underworld of the psyche. In Christianity, this is the descent into hell before resurrection. In mythology, it's the hero's journey into the cave before finding the treasure. In psychology, it is shadow work before individuation. You cannot ascend without first embracing what you've exiled. The shadow is not the opposite of spirituality. It is its foundation. Finally, integration is not a one-time event. You don't conquer your shadow and move on. It's a lifelong relationship. As you grow, new layers of shadow emerge. What you repress at 20 will be different from what you repress at 40 or 60. And every time it reappears, you have a choice. Turn away in shame and let it control you from the dark, or turn toward it, listen, and integrate. This is why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow doesn't disappear, but it can evolve from enemy to guide. So what do we have so far? The shadow is real. It speaks through desire, fantasy, and shame. Repression fuels it. Integration transforms it. The key is not to escape the shadow, but to dialogue with it, honor it, and redirect its fire. If you ignore it, it will destroy you. If you integrate it, it will make you whole. And this is where we turn next, the final stage of the journey. How confronting your sexual shadow doesn't just heal your private life, but reshapes society itself. Because here's the truth. Entire cultures have shadows, and unless we face them, history will repeat the same cycles of repression, explosion, and collapse. If this hit you where it hurts, or where it woke you up, share it. If it made you think, give it a like. And if you know a man who needs this truth, send it his way. Subscribe, because the conversations no one else dares to have with you are the ones we have here. And if you believe the truth is worth protecting, support the channel through the link in the description.